Let's talk about libraries. I love the library. You love the library. But in an age when most of us have info options at our fingertips, why are libraries more important than ever? Welcome to Dope Content. I'm your host, Laura Bergals, and with me is Scott Smith, our event co-host. And our special guest today is Holly Smith, who is joining us from the greater Detroit area. Holly is an elementary school librarian. She's also a reference desk substitute at her community library. And as long as she can remember, Holly has enjoyed books and working with books and being with young people. She's worked as both a bookseller and a middle school librarian. And before returning to the Detroit area in 2019, she drove a bookmobile in rural Wisconsin. Now, Holly, tell us, what led you to becoming a librarian?
Everything that you just named. Books were certainly a big part of my life. I've joked with my family before that our house would crumble if the bookshelves were emptied. So grew up loving books, definitely influenced by that. And then always seemed to enjoy working with children, at camps and that sort of thing. So I went into elementary education, but at the time there weren't too many job openings when I graduated, and I wasn't sure a classroom teacher was the fit for me. So I substitute taught, and I went to the local Barnes & Noble and worked there for a time. And the story I like to tell is I was dusting the career area of the bookstore, and a book fell out, but actually, obviously, I snuck it to take a peek because it matched you with what they thought your career should be based on your interests. And a page flipped to librarian, and it was an aha moment. I thought, why did I not think of this before? Now I can justify the years spent gaining experience with kids with the years spent working with books, and fit it together into a career, and went back to Wayne State University to get my library science degree with a school library focus.
This year, more people are going to the library. And what are your feelings as a librarian? What's behind the uptick in interest?
It's interesting because the first thought I had was, well, I guess libraries need to acknowledge that a lot of content is online now. So perhaps people that would get items through a library in the past might be streaming videos, that sort of thing. But then the argument could be made on the other side that these libraries are offering streaming services that people wouldn't have had before, and offering ebooks and content beyond what a person would normally consider to be traditional library materials. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as well, but there's a lot more that's being offered through libraries now than ever before.
Well, tell us about some of that.
Yeah, it's not, I like to kind of tease, I just said this to the students yesterday, it's not, well, it might be their mother's library because they are young and their mothers are experiencing the modern library, but it's not your grandmother's library, let's say that. I was speaking with them because it is Library Lovers Month, that libraries are not what you might think they are. So, for example, beyond books in both the print and electronic format, or movies still on DVD or streaming format, or music, you can still get CDs and also get it through streaming services. You can also check out board games. You can check out puzzles. And some libraries have really expanded this. And I've read up on things where they're checking out croquet sets, snowshoes, kayaks. And one of the most powerful things I thought for our bookmobile system was that they checked out zoo passes and museum passes. So I think as more and more people have needs that need to be met, libraries, I feel, are stepping in beautifully to fill that need with not only what you'd expect, but also things you never knew your library had to offer, which then bring people back, I think, for more visits.
Another thing that I think people need the library for is for a sense of quiet and a sense of community. Can you speak to that?
Oh, absolutely. I was just saying to somebody the other day that one of the big differences between going to a public library or Googling it, which is kind of the sort of stereotypical joke that, you know, librarians were the first search engine. And yes, we get it. You can get things through Google, but Google won't help you, for example, hit enter on this woman's resume when she had little computer experience. She was nervous about writing a resume for the first time or the first time in a long time. And she needed that human interaction that you don't get outside of a public library. And you may be able to count on others through other services to get similar, but our sole purpose is to be there to help you and get you the good information that you need and make sure that you leave with, you know, satisfied and happy that you were served. So I say that because I think there is understandable reticence in terms of what people think their experience will be, and there still are some sort of old school librarians with that stereotypical approach. But I think librarians have actually transformed libraries, because I wouldn't fit into the old context of being that type of librarian. I fit the more contemporary, where you might be loud sometimes, and there may be some interactive, boisterous events going on, and there might be in one room, as you mentioned, that hit on a note, a Skype session going on right next to a woman that needs to be in another room for quiet study. And sometimes that can create conflicts, but it's, to me, a microcosm of what's happening in society. We're all working together to get what we need, and we have to learn to use this space collectively as a community, just like we would hope our communities would function well together outside these doors. So I'm speaking about this at length because there's a lot of thoughts that always get into my head about this, but I really think that one of the reasons that hopefully millennials and others will start to poke their noses into libraries would be, I hope, because of the people that are there willing to connect you with what you might want or need and provide you a welcoming space that is inclusive to anybody that wants to take advantage.
As a person of means or people with income, I don't think they recognize how much quiet time they can actually get. For example, a young man that I was talking to that thought, hey, you know, we don't need libraries anymore, drives a BMW to work every day. And I'm like, there's quiet. You have, 20 minutes of quiet time on your commute to work, whereas somebody else might be in the public all day long, on public transportation, at their job, public transportation back home. Having a place that's actually quiet, that's a huge community resource.
I really appreciate you saying that, because one of the things I had to even remind myself at times with the students over the years was that this is a place where those people that need a more relaxing, quiet environment may only get it during this moment. They've been shuffled from class to class all day. They've been probably involved in mostly group activities. And for someone like me that tends toward the introverted side and needs downtime to regroup and to recharge, those students that came into the library at lunch needed that 10-15 minutes of non-interaction with their classmates, or a quiet moment with their notes, or just a calmer environment than they generally experience in this modern world, where they're then carted off to sporting events and family obligations, and then they have 2 hours of homework, that kind of thing. And I think that's really important what you said, because I hadn't even thought about how in a modern world, depending on your circumstance, that you might not have a quiet place to be. And it brings to mind different patrons I've spoken with just recently, my last shift, where this gentleman was in the cafe. That's another thing libraries are offering now. And he was on the phone, and he was a bit noisier. He's allowed to use it there. And when I walked through, he immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'm too loud." But then we launched into a conversation a little bit about what was happening with him. And I think for him, he needed a spot to kind of deal with what was happening in his life. He appreciated, as did I, the connection he made with another human being in that moment, to take a breath, to say, I hope that everything works out and you are welcome to use this space, and so on and so forth. So very powerful personal interactions with individuals, especially in my reference desk situation, because of everything that people are coming in to deal with. That, right, if you're coming in to get a printout for, this one woman needed her brother's disability forms, another person, as I mentioned, was doing a resume, others are really up to really important work, vital life needs and tasks. So to have a moment's quiet and to have a helping hand, I think is huge, and does kind of weave into what we were talking about in terms of community and how important libraries are, because we're not going to turn you away at the door. I think sometimes, speaking to what we were saying earlier, maybe young people think it's not a place for them. I think libraries are working on improving that, whether it be teenagers, certainly, because there's always that inherent conflict between the noisy area of the library where they are tend to be, and again, the quiet space that people need as well. And that might spill over to millennials because they are interacting in ways that traditionally libraries didn't attend to the same as they are now, and they might not know that. So I think it is important to get the word out, and this conversation is a good reminder of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of needs that are met by the library, like we said, beyond books and even beyond the resources. Like we talked about some of the, the flashy ones like the GoPro cameras and the kayaks and things, but simply having that quiet place. And even if you're not the introverted type of person, sometimes you need someone to talk to, and you can always go to a public library for that. And for those of us who are more extroverted, my library offers things like concerts and community programs and classes that are taught not just online and virtually, but real world classes that people can go to. I have an auntie who's in her 90s. She got a Kindle for the first time. To learn to use it, she went to the library.
Yeah, I also appreciate the ability, as the community hub, because, communication is very fractured now because there's so many places for people to put a notification about an upcoming event. I like being able to go into the lobby or some wall at the library, and the corkboard tells me what musicians are going to be playing by the lake or by the river, what sort of writers' workshops or, like community events are going to be happening. I mean, I learned about my representative's town hall a few years ago in the library, and I went to that, which was a few days later. I might have gotten communication on some of those events in another form, but more than likely I would have missed it, or the algorithm wouldn't have delivered it to me. So it's very nice to just have a vision board of stuff going on in the area.
I agree. I have found out about writers' events and other events simply by going there. And while you could make the point of, I could go on the computer and actively seek these things out, there's something to be said about having a community hub where you're not actively seeking things out, but you're roaming and scanning to see what hits you.
Right.
And I think that's a key distinction that being in that environment helps.
Yes, it's really interesting to have this conversation because, again, it connects with things that I've experienced in the library that I try and ponder after each shift, because it's a very positive feeling. What happened during these last several hours, and one of the ones that was really interesting, or I should say just kind of heartwarming, was a woman called and said, I have this boisterous 2-year-old boy and I'm looking for activities in the area that I can do with him. And she didn't think that story time would be for him, but they do offer obviously regular story times, that sort of thing. So I worked with another librarian to research things in other areas. The library has a relationship with the schools, and the school has a relationship with the library, and the students are kind of the collective citizens of both those spaces and look out for them. And people that are regulars, I think, connect with each other. I have regular individuals I know I'll see when I go into the library today, and they see each other. And I think more often than not, and in fact, I can say in every instance, that has created a positive connection between people, so that if, again, they are outside those walls, they may see each other again or connect over something they shared in a public library, like a book club or some of the events you mentioned as well. So it builds community, but it also expands community, I think.
Yeah, deepens relationships too, because the people that you see at the library, I'll be sitting working in a meeting room, look out and see two people playing chess. And then I'll walk out to get a drink, and we don't know each other, but then later I see them at the grocery store. So we can deepen a connection like, oh, hey, I know you. I don't really know you, but I've seen you around. You like chess, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you mentioned, Scott, about the tech, that was another first experience I had starting at this location. They offer one-on-one tech support, whether it's the tech that's working in the computer lab, if she has a moment, or there is a person that volunteers that comes in and you can make an appointment. And she and I might sit down with, in this case, this great couple that were elderly, and the woman seemed to be a little more tech savvy and was using an iPad and that sort of thing. And she was encouraging her husband to send her daughter a text message. So we worked for quite a while on helping him figure out how to do that, and what about his own personal device was blocking him from being able to do that easily. And out of that, it was determined that he likes to share pictures. So I spoke with them about maybe that's a way to do it, so that he doesn't have to struggle, which he was, with typing on that small keyboard and that sort of thing. His daughter knows that it's him writing, and if he wants to share aspects of his life, maybe that's an option. So those sort of personal interactions and one-on-one assistance, I find, is the most powerful, and also maybe something people who walk into a library don't expect.
I had a observation yesterday of a gentleman that was getting assistance with his own phone. It's not just usage, but there had been a change in his plan to where he wasn't getting a flat rate, and he was being charged 10 cents a minute. And he didn't recall doing anything online or with the phone. And I was, sitting at next to the periodicals reading, and I could hear the customer service person on the other end, and she was dodging the question left and right. And she said, this is your lucky day because you're the seventh caller, or something, like some sort of BS promotion. And she kept saying that, and he was very patient, and the librarian was sitting with him. I mean, there's not a lot that she can do with that. I mean, maybe like a how-to, or research your provider's phone plan and say, oh, you need to go in and click this radio button to change it. But it's just like, the patience was amazing. I mean, if you were to get support at a retailer that sells computers, even if it's one of their products or one that they manufacture or resell, you're probably not going to be able to talk very long before you're going to start paying money for it. And then you're not going to get that sort of focus either. You're going to say, I got stuff to do. I mean, you're going to get that kind of look from the technician and all that. But that was like I kind of felt sorry for the gentleman and the librarian. I didn't feel at all sorry for the provider.
Could you speak to the personal attention and patience that librarians have?
Well, I really appreciate that, because that is something that I think is unsung for librarians. And that's right. I was teasing, speaking of promotions, Scott, that I wore my public library shirt today. And this system, this Clinton Macomb, it's the two counties in this area combined for a library system with 3 branches, does an especially good job of supporting librarians in terms of letting them know you do what you need to do to help that person, which to me gives me the freedom to take the time that, as you mentioned, Scott, that person took with that person. I'm not under pressure to sit at the desk every minute. If I can keep an eye on it, but at the same time spend a large amount of time with somebody else, that's okay with them. They support that. If, for example, something's not working right with the computer and we've tried a number of things, that perseverance or persistence part, then I will print it from the reference desk. So I love, especially as a substitute who might not have all the answers, the ability to say, you know what, you need this tax form, or you need this information for an important thing you're working on. And it's okay for me as a librarian to override this, that, or the other thing that is stopping you from getting what you need. And what I found is, for the most part, already the environment has been created in this system, or at least this branch that I'm in, which is essentially an urban library, where most of the patrons already, I got into something easy because they already love and use the library. I can't count the number of times someone has said, I really love this library. You're always so friendly, and I always get what I need. And I don't take credit for that. I credit those that laid the groundwork and the foundation of this is the environment we want to promote. It came out very clearly in my interview, and I've seen it in practice. It's been modeled by the full-time librarians, and I do my best to model it myself. And it creates, back to that personal connection. I will see these faces again, the woman with the resume that I mentioned, and the next time she's a little less frustrated, and it's a little better interaction because she saw that I'm frustrated now, but I know you're going to help me too.
What can we do to get other people to love the library as much as we love it? How can we drop the stigma of going to the library? Just a real quick closing thought.
One of the things I worked on was this Libraries Are for Everyone movement. American Library Association has been promoting, and I know libraries have committees and things that are working really hard on making sure, whatever your socioeconomic, whatever your background, whether it's religion, race, etc., your ethnicity, that we're going to welcome you. So I think continuing to work hard on that, making sure that there is programming and that people are reflected in their libraries, is a key part of that.
Well, Holly, thank you for joining us today. Tell us, where can we find you online?
So I do have a Twitter account through my school and an Instagram if people want to see what's happening in our little library. That's Liggett Library. It's Liggett Library. That's Instagram and Twitter. And then I am on LinkedIn. It's Miss S Books. So MISSS So that's a bit of a mouthful. But I'd love to connect with people. I think professional learning and growth and conversations like this are also a vital part of all of this, and talking across content areas and professions is also key. A little side note along those lines, librarians are now working with social workers to address some of the things that they face. So that type of thing is really, I think, meaningful.
Libraries are certainly a hub for a lot of things: education, schools, social work, and beyond. Go to a public library.
Hear, hear.